Welcome back after a huge delay to my guide to video games history. The year is 1988 and Sega were already seen as the world masters of arcade games, with such hits as Space Harrier, Outrun, Afterburner, Shinobi and Altered Beast to name but a few. But in the home console market, they'd only had relative success in Europe and Brazil with their Master System. In Japan and America, really the console had been a total failure, barely making a dent on the mighty Nintendo console, which had almost total dominance of those regions. But the CEO of Sega, Hayao Nakaya, was determined not to be beaten and set his leading engineers to work on the 16-bit games console. So, on the 29th of October 1988, in Japan at least, us gamers got their first chance to play arcade quality games in the home. Originally released for 21,000 yen, it was called the Mega Drive, and this little black box was a wonder of design, cramming in a powerful 16-bit 7.67 MHz 6800 chip that had essentially powered the Amiga. But from the ground up, this black beauty was to play games, and so every ounce of its hardware was geared to moving 2D sprites around and recreate the colourful game characters that had wowed gamers in the arcade. Also of note was the game controller, which was a marvel of design, actually being one of the first to have ergonomic shape to the controller to be more comfortable to use. Put simply, on its release, the game controller was the best of its kind, giving that arcade experience in the home. But the problem was that in Japan, Nintendo had tied up such complete control and held such sway over its game publishers that Sega hardly stood a chance. And so, by the end of the year, armed with only 2 launch titles, they only managed to sell 400,000 units. Those launch titles were Space Harrier 2, a sequel to the huge worldwide hit in the arcades, and there was Super Thunderblade, another port of another arcade hit. They were okay arcade ports, but with both of them being shooters and the Japanese gamers being much more into sedate adventures and platform games, the launch titles did little to excite in that region. So, on the 14th of August that following year in 1989, Sega would release their Mega Drive console into the American market. They had originally tried to do a deal with Atari, but after delays and it eventually falling through, they decided to go it alone. They also had to give the machine a name change, as the trade name Mega Drive was already being used by a storage device firm. So instead they rebranded the consoles to the name Genesis in the America region. This time they felt on stronger territory, with their arcade hits being much more geared towards the action-orientated West. But even so, Mike Katz, the CEO at Sega in America, felt that he had learned from the poorly received Japanese release of the console, and knew that if they were to succeed in the West, they would have to not only have a great game lineup, but also an aggressive advertising campaign to win over the Nintendo market. The result was the now famous Genesis Does What Nintendo Don't campaign that directly compared the new Genesis console to the aging Nintendo NES. Also, being $189, Sega aimed their console to the teenage market, giving the machine a feeling of being edgier and cooler than the kiddie-friendly NES machine. Of course, no kid wants to be thought of as childish, so many gamers wanted to switch to this new, cooler machine. But of course, no advertising campaign in the world will sell the console if there wasn't the games to back it up. And in this, Sega hadn't disappointed, with a great array of launch games. There was the scrolling beat-em-up Altered Beast, which was a simple kung fu master clone but with gruesomely gory graphics and large sprites, where you played a Spartan warrior who could upgrade into various beasts. Also, Capcom had bucked the third-party developer drought with releasing their arcade smash hit, the sublime port of Ghouls and Ghosts. But it wasn't just arcade ports that Sega had up its launch title sleeves. They also had some original hits to grace the machine. There was Alex Kidd, the Master System mascot, who was brought across onto the Mega Drive with the game Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle. Unfortunately, it was an average game and would do little to frighten Nintendo's Mario. Better was the scrolling brawler Last Battle, which was based on the manga series Fist of North Star, and had you play Arzak as he punches and kicks his way through the post-apocalypse future world. The game, in retrospect, was platinum hard and unforgiving, but compared to the kiddie 8-bit NES games of the time, it won a lot of gamers over to the Sega console. Then you had Tommy Lasorda Baseball, a great sports title, if you like baseball, with brilliant graphics and in-depth gameplay. Finally, there was the sublime Thunder Force 2. This was a sequel to a pretty obscure shooter on the Sharp X6800 computer in Japan, but it was on the Mega Drive and Genesis that it would find its true home. Two more sequels would also follow for Thunder Force, with Thunder Force 3 in 1990, which had much better graphics, and Thunder Force 4 in 1992. Over in Europe, we wouldn't get to see this lovely machine until the 30th of June 1990, where the console sold in the UK for £190. It came bundled with the arcade smash Altered Beast, and thanks to Sega having more presence in this region, it immediately started to make an impact. Also in the UK, Sega would continue its imaginative advertising campaign with a brilliant Sega Ninja ad series and Sega Pirate TV ads. Things were looking good, but Sega knew that those things were about to change with the release of Nintendo's new machine called the Super Famicom. Sega had a good head start with over 1 million consoles sold in America at this point by mid-1990, and they also had a great catalogue of games. But Sega still didn't have an identifiable game that was unique to the console. In short, they needed a mascot to take on the might of Mario. That's the end of Part A, please go on to Part B.